Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Some of you are joining us tonight for the first time, and some of you have been with us for the last two nights. So we welcome everybody, and we're glad that you have this interest in learning more about our candidates for the at-large seat for the DC Council, which is a very important a position for us. But first, I'd like to tell you a bit about SWNA. SWNA was founded, SWNA is the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly, was founded in 1964. We are a nonprofit that's run entirely by volunteers. We have 8 very active task forces that work to fulfill our mission, which is to serve the residents of Southwest DC. We strive to improve the quality of life for all residents, to open to every resident the wide cultural horizon of urban living. We also strive to keep residents informed on current issues by offering monthly community meetings and by publishing our local newspaper, The Southwester. As a matter of fact, our moderator tonight is the editor of The Southwester. If you check out our website, if you're interested in ever writing an article for The Southwester or even taking an ad in The Southwester, you could find it all at SWNA.org. This forum is offered as an educational effort to afford residents to hear and connect to the candidates for the position of DC at-large council member. As I said, SWNA is a 501c3 nonprofit, and as such, we do not endorse any political candidate. But we do feel it's important to afford our residents the opportunity to meet the candidates so that you can make an informed decision when you vote on November 3rd. The at-large council member is really important to us. 13 members make up the council. A representative is elected from each of the 8 wards. We, Southwest here, have Charles Allen as our council member. There are also 5 members, including the chairman, who are elected at large. At large is a designation for the council for members who are elected or appointed to represent the whole city rather than just one ward, which is why this is an important position for the residents of Southwest and for DC at large. As a reminder, you can check your voting status at dcboe.org. I'd like to just call your attention that on our events page at SWNA.org, we have another important event coming up on September 24th and 25th. It's called Weather the Storm, and it's from our environmental task force, and it's talking about making DC a resilient city, but especially here in Southwest as we're right on the water. So now I'd like to take this opportunity now up front to thank our moderator, Mike Goodwin of the Southwester, and the amazing team that helped us pull this together. We have Carlton Julian in the background. He's our technology wizard who put this together on StreamYard, and Bianca Casilius, who is our event planner. Bianca, by the way, is a former SWNA scholarship recipient. She graduated from Benjamin Banneker High School and Penn State. Today, she's a professional event planner, and we're delighted that she is living back in Southwest and giving back by working with SWNA. And now I'll let Bianca on, and she will give you important information about tonight's format. Enjoy the forum, ask questions, and vote on November 3rd. Bianca, it's all yours. We're not hearing you. Mute.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that, everyone.
Right.
And thank you so much, Donna, for the introduction. I am Bianca Casilius, and I am the event planner for SWNA, as Donna mentioned. I am also the owner and lead planner of Casilius Creations, which is an event planning business based here in DC that I launched earlier this year. I'd like to thank you all for joining us again for another evening and give special thanks to tonight's candidates, as well as tonight's moderator, Mike Goodwin from the Southwestern. We are very grateful to have your participation in tonight's event. Before Mike introduces tonight's candidate, I would first like to share a couple of ground rules ahead of the panel Q&A. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to introduce themselves and give their opening statements. From there, the panel will begin, and Mike will pose each question to the candidates. Each candidate will have up to 1 minute to respond to questions, and Mike, you are allowed to use your own discretion if you feel as though the candidates deserve more time to speak. As we receive questions tonight from the audience in the chat box, Mike will direct them to the designated candidate for a response. If there is a general question that is asked and all candidates would like to address it, I ask that each candidate raise their hand if they would like to speak to avoid everyone talking over each other. I ask that everyone be respectful of these ground rules as well as each other's time. And with that said, Mike, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Bianca. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Goodwin, as they mentioned, editor-in-chief of the Southwestern. We are a monthly newspaper distributed here in Southwest and Navy Yard and run by an all-volunteer staff. So thank you to everyone who helps make the paper work, and that also includes members of the community who submit articles, submit photos of the month, purchase ads. All of those really help keep the newspaper running. I'll be tonight's moderator for the panel Q&A with some of our at-large candidates. As our viewers may know, this is night 3 of 3 of this debate. So tonight you'll meet a portion of the candidates and it will round out the full slate over the 3 nights. If you would like to view the first 2 debates, as well as this one, once we're done, you can find those on the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly's Facebook page. And as of tomorrow, you'll be able to find them at SWNA.org. That's SWNA.org on the events page. Before I introduce the candidates, I do want to thank all of them for joining us this evening, as well as thanking you, the viewers. I will reiterate a couple of the ground rules that Bianca mentioned regarding the panel. We'll start off with introductions of 2 minutes each. Those will go in alphabetical order, and I will call on each candidate. Then we'll move into question and answer portion. Each candidate, again, will have up to 1 minute to respond to questions. We do request that they be respectful of each other. We hope to not have to actually mute anyone, and I'm sure it will be a respectful conversation. If needed, we will move to a system of raising hands to be recognized. We do have a number of submitted and prepared questions, and as we receive additional questions through the comment box here, we will try our best to work those in. Now, we will begin with 2-minute introductions in alphabetical order. First up will be Christina Henderson.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. Should I just go ahead and get started?
Yep, you can go ahead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and thank you to SWNA for hosting this candidate forum. I'm a former resident of Southwest. I used to live at Waterside Towers down in Southwest DC, and so it's good to see all of you. A little bit about me. I am the daughter of an Army veteran and a New York City bus driver. My parents have always instilled in my siblings and I the value of hard work, collective action, and fighting for what you believe in, and that's what I've tried to do for my entire career. I've worked on political campaigns to help get some good people elected to office. I've advised and worked with U.S. senators. I've worked for a couple of school systems, including DCPS. And for 5 years, I had the pleasure and honor of serving residents in the District of Columbia, first at DC Public Schools, and then for 4 years at the DC Council. I was Councilmember David Crosso's first legislative director. And then when he became chair of the Committee on Education, I served as the committee director for 2 years before leaving for my current work. The thread throughout my entire career, though, has been about how do you help working families and children succeed? Because I truly, truly believe that one zip code should not be a barrier to your opportunity for success. And unfortunately, in DC, we know that's not the case. And that's why I'm running. I'm running because I believe we need a more equitable DC, and because we need more council members who are focused in on policies that are going to make DC more equitable and sustainable for us all. My life's work became a little bit more personal for me a little more than a year ago when I became a mom, an 18-month-old toddler. So I know the challenges of working families. And so some priority issues that I want to work on as a council member include increasing access to healthcare, including maternal care, specifically for Black and brown women in the district, increasing access to childcare, in particular small businesses, those childcare small businesses. I would like to work on equitable growth and affordable housing, and also on public safety. And so I look forward to hopefully the opportunity to talk about each one of these issues here tonight. And thank you again for the invitation.
Great, thank you so much. Next, we will move to Kathy Henderson for your 2-minute introduction, and I'll tell you when you can start, Kathy. Great, please go ahead, Ms. Henderson.
Thank you for the opportunity. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good evening. I think it's so important to be here, and I'm glad to be included in this important discussion about where we go after November 3rd. I'm running for a seat on the DC Council because I have a solid 20-year record as an award-winning advisory neighborhood commissioner. Advisory neighborhood commissioners are the first elected representatives in the district's home rule charter, and they are the closest elected representatives to the citizens in the District of Columbia. So over the years, I've been listening to my constituents and delivering for them. Issues like streetlights, public safety, sidewalks, economic development that we actually want, improving literacy for children. I've done it. And I'm not just saying that I've done it. I've received awards for my work. I've been recognized in People Magazine, Essence Magazine, the U.S. Attorney's Office. I've received awards from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Chief of Police, ANC 5B, CSOSA, the Citizens Advisory Council for the 5th District, and others for the work that I've done. Former Mayor Anthony Williams said of me, Kathy is a true leader. I've worked with all of the leadership in this city, and I have a record that I want citizens to consider, because we are in a situation now where we're dealing with a public pandemic, we have public safety issues, and no one has a stronger record on facilitating citizens having positive relationships with our police officers and improving our public safety. I want to see equity across the city, and we want to start with public safety, because you can't really talk about food deserts, you can't talk about economic development, high performing schools, unless you have public safety everywhere. Businesses do not want to operate in areas that are unsafe. They don't want to take the losses. So we really need to focus on public safety. And I want to make sure that every citizen in every corner of our city has a public, but a really professional interaction with our police officers. I'm proud of the work that our officers are doing and where we've come from. And I look forward to delivering even more. And I'm a strong candidate.
Great. Thank you very much.
Merit your consideration.
Thank you very much. Next, we will move on to Jeanné Lewis. Jeanné, I'll let you know when you can start.
Hi.
Great. Hi, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Jeanné Lewis, and I'm running as an independent for the DC City Council at large. I'm a big fan of your neighborhood. Grew up going to Arena Stage before the renovation, and actually went to eat at the Old Wharf for my prom. So very happy to be talking to all of you tonight. I grew up in the DC area in Maryland in Prince George's County. My mom was a DC public schools teacher and my dad worked for Amtrak. And I went to high school in the city in Northwest at Georgetown Visitation. And I remember DC growing up as a place that really felt like home, full of people who were deeply invested in our city and also who worked really hard to help nurture me into the person that I am today. I went away to college and worked mostly in social justice organizations around the country. I was a faith-based community organizer. I worked with young people in North Carolina doing restorative justice work. And when I came back to DC in 2010, I was directing a program with members of the US Congress that looked at the history of race and racism and how it impacts policy today. And I helped direct bipartisan conversations with members of Congress on that. But when I came back in 2010, DC was unrecognizable to me in some ways, although there was a lot of economic development, that feeling of home was missing. And so my vision for DC and the vision of the folks we talked to in all 8 wards before we launched is that DC is a place where someone can live here their whole life and thrive. And right now, that's not what we have. Layer onto that the pandemic and the economic crisis that we're facing right now. And our platform is really fit to help pull our city out of it. We're focused on equitable development across the city, really supporting small businesses and also cooperative models of business. We're focused on excellent schools in every single neighborhood, and we're focused on sustainable housing, both single family and rental housing. Obviously, we need to address our public safety and reimagine what that looks like. And I plan to bring my leadership and my experience working in the nonprofit sector, seeing best practices all over the country, and my experience working with everyone from members of Congress to grassroots leaders to work together to figure out what that means and help us all come out of this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we will move on to Will Merrifield. Will, I'll let you know when you can start. Okay, you can go ahead. I think you're on mute, Will.
Thanks for having me tonight. My name's Will Merrifield. For the last 8 years prior to running, I was an attorney at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless. At the legal clinic, I represented tenant associations across the district that were fighting back against large-scale redevelopment projects that would have displaced them. So I've had the privilege of being on the front lines of these redevelopment struggles, fighting on the streets, in the courtroom, at the Wilson Building with affected community members. We've had success in doing that. I represented a group of tenants over the Congress Heights Metro who refused to be displaced, and in that process ended up running out of town Sanford Capital, which was the biggest slumlord in Washington, D.C. So I've seen what happens when people stand up and fight. Unfortunately, I've also seen in doing this work that all too often our local elected leaders are working hand in glove with developers, giving them hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money and public land to build luxury units that people can't afford. It's causing mass displacement. It is driving up rents, and we're dealing with a family homelessness crisis on the back end of it. I'm running a campaign in direct opposition to that. I'm running on a program called social housing, which I hope we get to talk about tonight, that is a way to build truly affordable mixed income housing that actually pays for itself. I am running on a jobs program post-pandemic to put people back to work, recycle wealth back into the economy, which is going to be essential to get small businesses back on its feet. And lastly, I live in Deanwood. Strong neighborhood public schools and equitable health systems are very important to my neighbors when I speak with them. So I'm going to be fighting tooth and nail to reinvest in communities, reinvest in strong neighborhood public schools, and reimagine what healthcare looks like, make it affordable, accessible to everyone, and preventative. So thanks, and I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we will go to Marya Pickering. Ms. Pickering, I'll let you know when you can start.
Hi, thank you very much for having us. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you to SWNA for providing this forum and letting your neighborhood and your citizens know about the options that they have in this important city council race. I'm Marya Pickering. I've lived in Washington, D.C. for most of my adult life, since the mid-1980s. My daughter was born and raised here, and she's a proud DC resident, and I raised her to be a lady engineer. So that's one of my big accomplishments in this life. I've been active in my faith community and in my local community for, again, a long, long time. Professionally, I have been a government contractor. I'm an immigrant and a refugee, and I've worked a whole lot of jobs in the course of my life. I've been a cocktail waitress. I've done piecework in factories. I've been a nurse's aide. So I appreciate the hard work that people in so many of our industries perform, and I'd like to craft a better future for the citizens of Washington, D.C. My campaign motto is no more business as usual, and I'm running because I think we need new ideas and prudent management in the City Council. My experience as the startup in startup small businesses, in government, and in large industry as a contract management specialist, I think uniquely qualifies me for the council's oversight role. As a mother, I believe that all our children deserve a quality education. I know from my own experience growing up as an impoverished immigrant, a good education is everyone's ticket to a better life. As a homeowner, I support a strong police force so that we can have safe neighborhoods. As a businesswoman and taxpayer, I would fight to improve our contracting process, get away from these sole source contracts and sweetheart deals with developers that do not serve our citizens well and do not provide the kind of low income and affordable housing that we need in the city. And as a senior, I am favoring reduced taxes on pension income, which we used to have and which one of my competitors in this race voted against in 2014.
Great, thank you, Ms. Pickering. We're over time.
Okay.
Thank you. And our final introduction goes to Michangelo Scruggs. And Mr. Scruggs, I'll let you know when you can start. Great, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Michangelo Dr. Mick Scruggs, and I am seeking the privilege to become your next DC Council member at large. DC is tired. DC is tired of all of the promises that are never being given. DC is tired of people saying they're going to do something and it never gets done. DC wants change and needs change, and I am the candidate of change. I bring with me 18 years being a physician and practicing 10 of those years in Southeast Washington, DC as a physician, as a podiatric physician. So I have the awesome opportunity to speak with my patients and other constituents about what they need here in the city. And what they need is someone who's going to listen to them, who's going to fight for them every day. And just as I do in my practice, just as I do in my profession, that's what I will do from the first day to the last day that I am a councilman in the city hall. I will work and fight for each and every person in the District of Columbia. Moreover, I will listen. I will listen and solicit input from the citizens of the District of Columbia. Many often feel as if they are recipients of laws and policies that they're not a part, they don't play a part in making. And so therefore, I would certainly engage the citizens and solicit their support and make sure that I'm doing everything to meet the needs of the citizens of the District of Columbia. I will be their voice. I will be your voice in City Hall. So I am the change, you are the change, and together, DC, we can change DC to work for all of us. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me tonight.
Great, thank you, Doctor. I should mention that we also had another candidate, Aisha Howard, who was scheduled, but she had an emergency come up, so she may not be able to join us tonight. Now we will move on to the question and answers portion. So we can pull all of the candidates up onto the screen, please. A number of these questions are from our previous two moderators, Fennet Narapol with the Washington Post and Mitch Riles of City Paper. I want to remind candidates that we ask you to now keep your answers to the questions at 1 minute or less. There will be some questions where we will ask everyone to provide an answer. There will be other questions where we ask for a show of hands, and then we will do follow-ups as appropriate on those questions. And I do appreciate one comment already that we have from a viewer that they appreciate seeing the show of hands because it shows where candidates are, even if not every candidate gets to speak on a particular issue. So thank you for that comment. And we will move into the first question. I will call on each candidate to answer in random order. This first one will start with Kathy Henderson, and then we'll go from there. So the question is, due to COVID-19, the economy has been in a medically induced coma, and the DC government has had to make tough choices to maintain the budget. Given what may be tough economic choices that need to be made over the next several years, where is an area that you feel is ripe to be cut, or how would you raise revenue? Starting with Ms. Kathy Henderson, and then I will call on candidates from there. Ms. Henderson.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to really get to the meat and potatoes of this issue, the issue regarding where we are. First of all, to everyone, COVID will pass. Coronaviruses have been around for a very long time, and this too shall pass, and we will rebuild, we will be resilient, and we will be stronger. I continue to go over the budget in detail. I participate in every budget cycle, and at the top of the list would for my choice would be to defund the controversial McMillan Reservoir project. It just doesn't make sense. There's way too much controversy, and we should not be supporting developer giveaways. I don't support backroom deals. I also think that we should remove the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, which is nothing more than a political opportunity for friends with friends on the council and in the mayor's office. It serves no purpose, and it certainly does not address any of our public safety needs. So that's what, $80.5 million right off the top. And I would go, there are a number of other agencies and initiatives that have really failed to deliver for district residents. And we need to make sure that we are not supporting backroom deals and elected representatives' pet projects. This is a city for all of us, and it should represent our wishes, our needs, and where we want to go as a city.
Great, thank you. Same question to Michangelo Scruggs, please.
A number of initiatives that I think we should do to help to fill the budget. One, corporate community investment tax on businesses that make over or gross over $10 million a year should be able to pay 1.5% a tax into a community investment fund that will be earmarked specifically to be invested in the community and projects. I do not believe in giving developers extra money to open in DC, but I believe that if you want to build in DC and you want to be a part of the DC, then you need to invest in DC. And that's been the problem historically. Companies have come in and they've made their millions off of DC residents and have left, and we've been desolate. So that certainly is something that I would certainly favor. I would also favor contracts that included community investment as well as mentorship of small business, DC-based businesses.
Great, thank you. Will Merrifield, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, to raise revenue, I think we're absolutely going to have to raise taxes. I support reversing the Trump tax cuts. As a start, people would be paying no more than they paid previous to those tax cuts, and that would raise about $500 million. Like I said previously, I'm the tenant association attorney at a place called Brooklyn Manor, and there's a developer that wants to tear down deeply affordable housing, replace it with mostly luxury apartments, displace people, and the DC Council, every single member on DC Council voted to give that developer $47 million. And there's Brooklyn Manors that are happening all over the city. So we have to, I do not believe that people understand the extent to which our local government is subsidizing this luxury real estate market. That has to end. And post-pandemic, we have to invest in building from the ground up, putting money in people's pockets through a jobs program, and using this as an opportunity to build infrastructure, affordable housing to solve that crisis.
Thank you. Ms. Pickering, same question.
Thank you. Before the shutdowns, I had the opportunity to attend a couple of Mayor Bowser's so-called budget forums. And it seemed to me from those exercises that there are plenty of opportunities where we could reduce services that are duplicated throughout city agencies or that might be better performed by other organizations. I think this would be a good time for every city agency to do a zero-based budgeting exercise and really take a close look at their individual budgets and at opportunities for saving the taxpayer money and for providing services that need to be provided, but without duplicating them in in other areas. So I think we need to really carefully look at our budget, and we really need to work to get ourselves back on a good footing economically. I agree with Mr. Curl, who wrote in today's Washington Times that the cure has been worse than the disease in terms of all these shutdowns, and particularly hard hit are the hospitality and restaurant industry, of which I used to be a member as a waitress once upon a time. And this accounts for between 11 and 18% of our tax base. I think it's important for us to work to restore our small businesses and to save our small businesses and revive our thriving service industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pickering. Ms. Lewis, you're up next. Same question, please.
So I think that we should start our conversation around the opportunity to look at alternative revenue models for our city. And so one thing that I've been proposing in many of these candidates forums is a mini bonds program similar to the one that was instituted in Denver, Colorado. Many people in the district who work for the federal government or national or international organizations have stable incomes right now, people like myself. And so in this program, residents can own the debt of the city, which provides an immediate source of capital that we can target to a specific area. I believe that we should target that to our small business infrastructure because we know that business is a huge part of our tax base in the city and we can strengthen that. But I also think that as we relieve the pressure on individuals by canceling rent and other items, folks will be able to spend their money and keep our economy flowing in the city. So before we look at cuts, I would like to start with looking at how we generate additional income and then work together as a city government to talk about where we can take cuts across all agencies.
Thank you very much. And last for this question, Ms. Christina Henderson.
Thank you. So I believe that even though we're facing an uncertain economic time, we still need to fight for a more equitable DC, and that starts with the DC budget. I think that we're going to have a balanced approach, certainly increasing some revenues, but also looking at the budgets of agencies and having real conversations with agency directors and the mayor's office and all of the council members in terms of what are our priorities in terms of making sure that we are providing the critical services that are needed and necessary for our residents who are in greatest need. And so I'm not opposed to increasing additional revenues. I do think that we need to put some guardrails on that. For instance, I don't think that increasing property taxes or increasing business taxes is prudent at this time. But I also think that we might have to put some projects on hold, for instance, expanding the streetcar and some other things like that.
Thank you very much. Now we will move on to our next question. This will be a show of hands question, and then we will do follow-ups as appropriate. So by show of hands, please raise your hand to be seen in the screen if you believe that Mayor Bowser is doing a good job. So it looks like Miss Christina Henderson is the only one. Then the floor is yours, Miss Christina Henderson, to please explain why you believe that.
Yeah, thank you. I think you asked a very broad question. I think as it pertains to COVID in terms of making decisions around getting some testing sites, yes, all of this started slow, but I do feel like the response of what we've done in the District of Columbia has certainly been better than certain other jurisdictions. And we haven't seen the spike that we could have if our leadership on the city side had slowed and delayed. Do I think that there are certainly areas of improvement? Absolutely. But in terms of where we are right now, I do actually think that we are doing better than many other jurisdictions in terms of the leadership that we have.
Would anyone like to jump in first to explain why they didn't? Will Merrifield, you had your hand up first, and then we'll go to Miss Kathy Henderson. So Will.
Yeah, and just before I answer, can I clarify? I thought that was this isn't just COVID related. It's
right, yes, the question was raise your hand if you believe Mayor Bowser is doing a good job.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we live in one of the most inequitable places in the country. We had until recently the highest rate of displacement of residents, mostly Black residents in the country. We have a deeply inequitable school system that doesn't work for a lot of children in Washington, D.C., and we have one of the highest unemployment rates of African-American men in the country east of the river. So I believe we live in a deeply inequitable District of Columbia, and I think that it's reflects on not only Mayor Bowser, but previous administrations that through booming economic times, we were not making appropriate investments in public institutions and in people to build a strong, equitable Washington, D.C. And that is why I'm running, because working at the Washington Legal Clinic for the Homeless, I a lot of times had to answer phone calls from single mothers sleeping in cars, trying to access shelter with their children. And these mothers were working 1 and 2 jobs at a time. Cost of living is too high in Washington, D.C., and the city just doesn't work for a lot of people.
Thank you, Mr. Merrifield. Kathy Henderson can be the last person to answer on this question. Please go ahead, Ms. Henderson.
Just very briefly, as a 20-year advisory neighborhood commissioner, I've had to work very closely with every mayor to deliver resources for my constituents. And I can tell you that the climate in this city has never been more polarized. And I think that's owing to the lack of concern for certain zip codes. If I talk to my friends in Spring Valley, they say the mayor's doing a great job. But when I talk to the people in my neighborhood, in Ward 5 and people in Ward 7 and people in Ward 8 and people struggling in this city, people that look like us, they say that the city is not moving in the right direction and that the mayor is not doing the job that she should be doing. And finally, our infant mortality rate still remains one of the highest in the country. And how can that be when we have a woman at the helm? There are a lot of issues that we need to address, and I'm ready to tackle a lot of them as the next at-large member on the council. And I want us to be able to work together to move the entire city forward, not just certain zip codes.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to another show of hands question. We'll move into the topic of education, which has already come up a bit. The show of hands, please. If you support, please raise your hand if you support mayoral control of DCPS. Looks like Miss Christina Henderson is the only one again, so the floor is yours, Miss Henderson, to get us started.
Man, didn't know it was going to be such a tough crowd out here on my own. But look, I've worked in education in several different school districts, including DCPS. I do feel like there are not that many jurisdictions that are in their second or third iteration of mayoral control. And I do feel like for the change that has happened in the district over the last 15 to 20 years in terms of education, mayoral control has certainly played a role in terms of changing the direction of public school enrollment that we have in DC. Do I feel like there needs to be additional oversights and controls? For instance, when New York City Department of Education went to mayoral control, they didn't completely get rid of their Board of Education. They still have an advisory group that handles major contracts, school closures, school assignment policies. And I do think that that's something actually that DC would very much benefit from in terms of our next stage of progress.
Great, thank you. And would either Dr. Scruggs or Ms. Pickering, I'll go to Ms. Pickering. I was going to also ask of Ms. Lewis, the three who didn't speak on the previous question. So we'll go to Ms. Pickering first, and then Ms. Lewis is nodding her head, and then Dr. Scruggs can answer if he wants as well. So Ms. Pickering.
Thank you. Well, is a 62% high school graduation rate something we're proud of as a city? Let me ask you that. This was before the shutdowns. Okay, so mayoral control is not working for our children. It's not working for our students. And my recommendation is that we reinstitute a public school board of education and give it real authority and let it be responsive to parents and let it be responsive to the community. As an immigrant who grew up in poverty, I can tell you from my own experience that an education is everyone's ticket to a better life. It worked for Dr. Carson. It worked for Nellie Galan. It worked for Frederick Douglass. It worked for me and lots of others. We really need to up our game. And as your council member, I would work to raise our high school graduation rate to 90% and to have a strong vocational technical track that would allow people who are not going on to further education to get the skill set that they need in order to graduate and get good jobs at which they can earn decent livings. The mayor's infrastructure academy, that another boondoggle that probably should go on the chopping block, is too little too late. It targets the demographic over 19. We need to start targeting children at the high school level who have the skills for very good jobs, plenty of opportunities to earn a decent living in the infrastructure industry, and I really need to up our game there. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Lewis next, and then Dr. Scruggs.
So my mother retired from the DC public school system in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. And the same inequities that we see now were reflected then. So, and now we have a situation in which the voters and the residents of DC do not have full power to choose their representatives and give them the full authority, as Ms. Pickering was saying. And I think it's critical that residents and voters in DC be able to do that, that our rights are restored so that we can truly influence our school system, the entire school system, not only traditional public schools, but also charter schools. And I think that the fact that the mayor can appoint effectively a separate school board is not ethical and is not serving the voters.
Thank you, Dr. Scruggs. And then it looked like Mr. Merrifield and Ms. Kathy Henderson were also interested in this topic. So if they are, then we'll allow that too. But Dr. Scruggs, please go ahead.
In some schools, especially in Southeast, you have a 17% reading comprehension rate. You have a 1% math skills math skills rate. That's not great. That's awful. And we have to stop putting our children as political pawns, okay? There should not be any mayoral control of the school system. We elect school boards. They pretty much go in knowing what the schools need. We also cannot hold a school chancellor or school superintendent responsible and predicate their tenure on curriculum development and making sure our students are able to compete globally with their peers when it's under mayoral control. So I absolutely detest the fact that we're using our kids as political pawns, really, in this city. You know, we have to focus on curriculum development. We have to focus on mentoring and tutoring, and we have to meet these children where they are. We have to train them with innovative methods. Because I was bored in school, and they thought I was retarded when I was. It was because I was bored, and no one cared to train or teach me correctly or teach me the way I could be reached. So that's what we focus on. No mayoral control ever.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll go to Will Merrifield and then end this question with Kathy Henderson. So, yes, Will, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm for you know, having local control via school board. I think parents and teachers know best. I believe that we have to strongly push back against the testing model that creates a self-perpetuating system by which disinvested schools become more disinvested in as children don't perform at the levels on the test that other people do. I would propose a moratorium on charter schools, a reinvestment in strong public schools. I think Ms. Pickerton hit the nail on the head. We have to provide people with the opportunity to learn a trade in school, to come out and get good living wage jobs. And I think in 8th grade, every kid should sit down and have a pathway put forward to them to go to UDC for free if they want to do that, or have a pathway put forward for them to say, hey, if you want to trade, you can do that as well. And let children evolve and decide what they want to do, but give them runways to look down instead of, you know, the system that we have right now, which is really, it seems chaotic to me.
Thank you. And I'll remind everyone, please mute yourself if you're not talking with the button down at the bottom of your screen, just to avoid background noise, please. Ms. Kathy Henderson, last word on this goes to you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes, I began my career helping 1st through 3rd graders improve their reading skills. And Dr. Scruggs, I know exactly what you mean. we had children in our program that were labeled as retarded. That was absurd. Our children can learn. We tested them before and after, and they improved their reading skills. Our children can learn. Mayoral control over the schools has not delivered, and I don't think that we can have a credible conversation about statehood, self-autonomy, and disenfranchisement if we're overlooking and marginalizing what should be an empowered, democratically elected school board.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We will continue with education, and this will be a question going back to calling on each of you in a random order. This September, our kids started school again, though DC Public Schools is all virtual due to the pandemic. It has made more evident the vast digital divide among DC families, as many students do not have access to technology or the internet. What will you do to ensure that solving the digital divide for families will remain a priority for DC government, including after the pandemic is over? I'll start with Will Merrifield on this, as we've done random order throughout all of these questions, and then we'll go around. So, Mr. Merrifield.
Yeah, I mean, what the pandemic has shown, it's exposed inequities that have long existed before the pandemic. The digital divide is one of those inequities. I think that, we have to deliver. I would work with experts to say how best to deliver broadband to the entire community for free. I know other communities have done that and are able to do that. But I think that this issue of the technology divide, it goes further. It's communities that have been systemically disinvested in housing and living wage jobs and technology. So I think we have to tackle all these things together and look at them, connect dots, and not deal with these issues one by one by one.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Lewis.
So since the shutdown in March, one thing that I've proposed is that we look at the best practices of cities around the country. We have low ridership right now on our Metro bus infrastructure, and in other cities, they've used their school buses as hotspots, park them around the city to boost the signal or to become hubs for internet access. We often talk about devices, children having access to devices, but we don't talk about the weak signals that exist east of the river in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods across the city. So I think that's one piece that we can do immediately to boost our infrastructure. As Mr. Merrifield said, we need to invest in tightening up that infrastructure citywide so we all have access to it. And then there's current legislation in the council to make sure that every DC public school student has a device over the next 3 to 5 years. We need to accelerate the implementation of that. And I believe the price tag on it is $11 million, which we could have spent to do if we had not voted to expand the streetcar. So Christina alluded to that earlier. I agree that we need to delay that project in order to prioritize our students and our children.
Thank you. Christina Henderson, next.
Yes, thank you. So the digital divide question, I feel like is one that we've known for a while. I'm of the belief that students need access to one-to-one devices and broadband, even when we're not in a global pandemic. I live in Petworth, and it's often where I would see young people sitting out in the parking lots after hours, just trying to get a little bit of the Wi-Fi, or, at the McDonald's or other places like that. And so I believe that we need to issue one-to-one devices and access to broadband in the same manner that we issue textbooks. But also, again, how do we tackle our municipal broadband issues? We have figured out how to do free Wi-Fi downtown, but we have not expanded that into our neighborhoods. Obviously, that's going to take having conversations and being able to take on large corporations like Comcast and AT&T and others who have often fought this in other jurisdictions. But if I'm elected, I'm up for the fight.
Kathy Henderson, next, please.
It's really a matter of priority. We can certainly go through the budget and remove backroom deals that take up our resources when we could distribute that to our students. One such backroom deal is the 8th Street, Main Street. That's $250,000 that's not even properly accounted for every year. And every year the director goes to the council and begs for more money, yet has refused to provide the necessary reporting to actually justify receiving that initial money. And we need to also be very creative in making sure that our children don't necessarily need laptops, they need a Wi-Fi signal. A lot of our children have cell phones. You can actually do your homework on a cell phone. We need to be very creative about expanding the opportunity to connect our children with the Wi-Fi so that they can learn. Our children are very bright. They're very resilient. They stay on Facebook. They stay on social media. And we need to make sure that they're focused on using technology to actually, promote their studies and improve their learning opportunities. And we need to be very creative about talking to them about that.
Great, thank you. Dr. Scruggs, you're next.
Our children are worth it. One of the things that we need to do is we need to stop looking at this as just a luxury and start looking at technology as a necessity, especially during this pandemic. Our children need computers. Everyone, whether it's a iPad or tablet or something, they need something. Because I know me, I can't look on a little bitty phone and see anything. But we need to ensure that we're doing internet cafes, especially in communities where the Wi-Fi and the broadband is low. We need to partner with Comcast and Verizon and say, look, you need to provide this service almost little to nothing for our school system. How can we come together and make this happen? In the immediate, every child should be able to get a MiFi or a personal hotspot to go along with whatever digital device that they have, so that they'll be able to have their lectures and do their homework. That's just a necessity. That's just like prioritizing education. That's
Thank you. Thank you. And last for this question, Ms. Pickering.
Thank you. Yes, I think this pandemic has brought about some issues that we really need to focus on in terms of a quality education. My understanding is that the public school system is working now to try to get laptops and devices to each student. And that's only the first step. After things open up again, I would recommend that the schools work with our excellent public library system that have computers and have resources and people there who could help guide students in doing research using the resources in the libraries. But it is important that our students be technology literate and that they also get the support from their parents and their communities, whether it's neighborhood centers or their faith communities or places like Friendship Place here in our neighborhood that work with the homeless and try to get people back on their feet. It's important for our students to be technology literate, and this is a good time for us to explore creative solutions to help raise the level of education across the board.
We'll now move into policing as a topic. We'll start with a show of hands question. The question is, please raise your hand if you support Police Chief Newsham. It looks like Miss Kathy Henderson and Miss Pickering. So we'll let you two go first. Miss Henderson, you can go first, and then Miss Pickering, and then we can hear from others who may be interested. So Miss Kathy Henderson.
Well, I can tell you policing under any circumstances is a very challenging profession. And I simply thank all of the women and men that put their lives on the line each day to leave their families to come and serve and protect the rest of us. With regard to Peter Newsham, I testified at his confirmation hearing. His background, I think, obviously equips him with all of the skills to serve our city and to serve our city well. He is a career police officer, a member of the Metropolitan Police Department, and he's an attorney. And he is certainly a calm presence in the storm. He's very deliberate. He's very personable. He's committed to community policing. He answers all of his emails very promptly, his phone calls. He connects with the citizens, and he continues to perform under the weight of just mounting unfair pressure by those that have a different agenda, and by those that have an agenda just to demolish the police department, which is really absurd. But I support him, and I continue to pray that he is safe, and to make sure that he can lead the women and men under his command to protect us.
Thank you. Ms. Pickering, you raised your hand in support of Police Chief Newsham. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes, thank you. I support Chief Newsham. I think he's doing a fine job. A few years ago, I was working business development for a small company in the security training space, and I had the opportunity to tour the MPD training facility in Blue Plains and see their scenario-based training firsthand. And I can tell you, and so will some of the police officers, that we have the finest training for our police department in the country, which means we have the best trained police force in the world. Now, given that, they are in a very unique situation because we're not just a city, we're a unique federal district where our police force has to interact with other law enforcement agencies, and that provides a great challenge. I know former Chief Lanier, I had an opportunity to meet her several times, and she told us about how quickly they turned their training around after the Navy Yard shooting some years ago. They quickly turned their training to incorporate that kind of scenario. They also worked under Chief Lanier, and I believe under Chief Newsham, they continue to do so to provide better coordination between all the other law enforcement agencies that are here, the county police and so forth and so on. So yes, I support the chief.
Thank you. So our next question will get into policing reform specifically, but is there anyone else who would like to comment on the police chief? Dr. Scruggs, and then Ms. Lewis, and then we'll move on. So Dr. Scruggs.
First of all, let's just look back at the most recent slaying of 18-year-old Deon K. Okay, I looked at the response that the chief made. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, "You can look at the video frame by frame and make your own conclusion. We'll draw our own conclusion when we do the investigation." And then in June, he also said, because he was upset by the emergency legislation of the city council, he also sent notices on a private YouTube channel to his officers telling them, well, there's more reform on the way that may put you in harm's way. What does that do to the public trust? What does that do to ensure us that he has all of our best interests at heart and he's going to try to keep all of us safe? I have a problem with that. And no, I don't support someone who does not really appear, in my opinion, to support me, people who look like me, and the communities that I, once I become councilman, that I will serve.
Thank you. And Ms. Lewis?
So I want to start by saying that I'm related to police officers. My uncle retired as a detective from Metropolitan Police Department in the 90s. But, you know, when I look at our current state of MPD, there are several problems. Dr. Scruggs pointed out a few. I think the officers that we do have, there are a large number of them who live outside of the district, which we know is not even at the least oriented towards community-based policing, which I think is the absolute floor of what we should aim for. And the cries of defunding the police from Black Lives Matter echo a sentiment that has been asserted for years around relying more on other agencies in the district. And the chief is in the position to make sure that we focus on those other agencies and include them in our public safety work. And he has not done that. Even programs that have been recommended through the NEAR Act or other legislation to draw more on those agencies, he has not partnered well with them. And so I think there's definitely room for
Thank you very much. We will move on to the next question, and this one will allow an opportunity for everyone to answer. We'll start with Ms. Pickering. We have clearly seen a significant desire for policing reform throughout the country as well as here in DC. What more do you believe DC can do, if you believe more should be done in the area of policing reform? We'll start with Ms. Pickering and then go around in random order.
Thank you. Well, no human institution is perfect, and there's always room for improvement. And certainly the recent civil unrest has brought to light gaps, if you will, in some of the police coverage. I think continuing to train our police force to deal with the issues that they have to deal with. I know again, going back to the administration of Chief Lanier, we've had community outreach in terms of the police cadet program that tries to recruit people in all neighborhoods and bring people from all backgrounds into the police force. And I think that is something that ought to be continued, and we need to continue to look at ways to improve, to serve citizens in all of our wards, because everybody wants to be safe. Everybody wants their neighborhood to be safe. They want their kids to be safe on the way to school or to go and play with friends. So this is a very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Scruggs, you're next up.
A number of things. One, we need stiffer penalties for officers who commit police brutality and unnecessary excessive use of force. We need to, because the community does not believe in our police department, especially in Ward 7 and 8. We need more community rallies so that the people in the community can come and really voice their opinions and talk to the law enforcement, and that there can be a healing process. And so, so that people can know that every cop is not bad. There should be a requirement to live in the district to be a MPD officer, because I believe you cannot invest in the community if you're just coming here to come to work, and you're going to have a very different perspective on how you administer law enforcement. And also, I think that we need to focus on putting more officers in a particular area that look like and that are a part of the racial and ethnic backgrounds of most of the community members in that area, because that will diminish the possibility of overt racially charged confrontations between the community and between the officers.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Merrifield, you're up next.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, obviously much reform needs to be made. I mean, you know, I've said before, I represented the Tenants Association at Brooklyn Manor, and, you know, I think about the way communities that are slated for these large-scale redevelopments are policed, and I think it's an us against them mentality, and I believe that that immediately needs to change. Like I said, at Brooklyn Manor, there was $47 million given to a developer to displace families out there. What if we invested $47 million into the community that exists in Brooklyn Manor? So I think that there needs to be a change from the top down, from the mayor to city council to Chief Newsham, in the way we're investing and the way that we're thinking about communities and policing. And I mean, I thought that Ms. Lewis and Mr. Scruggs laid out the complaints against Chief Newsham very eloquently, and I agree with everything they said. And I would also agree with, you know, I'd also point out that I think it's clear that, you know, Chief Newsham was coordinated with the Trump campaign, with the Trump administration, to kettle peaceful protesters. And that, you know, that should be put out there too as a failure on
Christina Henderson, you're next.
Thanks. I think there's a lot of work to do in terms of improving the relationship between the police and community, and a lot in terms of rebuilding trust. But as a council member, one area that I really want to focus on is around law enforcement's interactions with our juveniles and our young people in this city. I think for a lot of our young people, they spend an inordinate amount of tension and lots of psychological resources to their day-to-day survival, including interactions with the police, and not just MPD, but also Metro Transit Police, which I think often gets left out of the conversation, even though they have jurisdiction here in the district. And, you know, they also, you know, have some really inappropriate interactions, I would say, with our young people. So I think we need to pass a law that provides a standard in terms of juveniles' interactions with law enforcement. I also think that we need to disaggregate our stopping and frisk data by age, so we can actually see in terms of how often we're stopping young people. I think there's a lot of research that shows that brain development of young people don't fully develop in terms of decision making until they're in their 20s, and yet we treat teenagers as though they're fully grown adults.
Thank you. Kathy Henderson, you're next.
Yes, we've actually done a lot of work with moving our police department forward and to be more responsive to citizens' needs. When I started out as an ANC commissioner, people didn't want to talk to the police. They didn't like that. Over the years, I'm very proud to say that I have facilitated really positive interactions with our police. We grill together, we talk together, we have safety walks together. They are our neighbors. We have respect for one another, and we really appreciate the work that they do. The police department has implemented my request to add members to the Use of Force Review Board. And the Justice Department came in, I think in around 2005, made some recommendations under Chief Ramsey that were implemented. So the police department is moving in the right direction. And one last point, I had my purse snatched at Wheaton Mall many years ago. And a detective sent me a letter. Dear Ms. Henderson, I'm so sorry about your experience. If there's anything that we can do to assist you, please call us. And I thought that was really exceptional customer service. And I broached that at the time. And people were like, what? Customer service from the police? We get that. We have some of the best trained officers. They're polite, they're well-mannered, they're well-trained, and they want to work with citizens, and they do work with us, and we want to build on.
Thank you. And Ms. Lewis.
So again, I want to note that I'm related to police officers, and my thoughts on this issue come from not only conversations with community members, but also with them and my own experience. I have witnessed an armed robbery in my neighborhood. My house has been broken into, my car has been broken into. And yet I think there are some concrete things we can do to reform police and draw our attention to real community safety. The first is that we need to support efforts to end qualified immunity. People are dying. And so if someone dies by engaging with a police officer on duty, qualified immunity shouldn't even be on the table so that we can have a thorough investigation. Secondly, we need to limit the authority of police unions. I know police officers who recognize that there are so-called bad apples in the department, but they are also limited by the authority of the police unions to protect those folks from being put off the force. And so we need to limit that authority of police unions in those regards. And thirdly, locally, what I would push for as a council immediately is to put some of our other services in the city in our dispatch process. I've called 311 and 911 for our community response team for mental health support, and I've always been directed to the police. That's ridiculous. And as a voter and a citizen, I should be able to call and get someone who's not a police officer to deal with a nonviolent issue.
Thank you very much. We will now move to a question that is in the comments from a viewer. And if you would like to answer or comment on this, then please raise your hand, whether immediately or while one of the other candidates is answering. I'll read some of this verbatim and then paraphrase. Ask about recent crime increases, summer 2020 compared to 2019. Violent crime, homicides, robberies went up 35%. 91% of that increase was in wards 4, 7, and 8. We have not done these statistics. This is what the viewer is writing. How is the defund MPD movement impacting violent crime? Have new programs and additional spending made any difference? So I think I would ask if there's anyone who'd like to comment specific to the question here or on increases in violent crime in the city. It looks like we'll do Kathy Henderson, Ms. Lewis, Mr. Merrifield, Pickering. Everyone has raised their hand. So why don't we start with Kathy Henderson?
Thank you. I think we need to be very careful about conflating a national narrative with what's not happening here in the district. There are incidents that really need police reform, and some police departments may need to be defunded. MPD is not one of them. I think that with this continued rhetoric of defund the police and disrespect for law and order, it is emboldening criminals, and we see that across the city. People are doing things that they were not doing before, and that has to stop. We want to make sure that the relationship that we have with our police is one of respect. They work for us, with us, they serve and protect us. But we need to make sure that we don't put them in harm's way with dangerous rhetoric that also allows individual lawbreakers to commit crimes against citizens.
Thank you. And we'll do this more or less in the order that you raised your hands. So Ms. Lewis, you can go next.
So again, I witnessed one of those violent crimes this summer since the shutdown. And so I think Mr. Merrifield alluded to this earlier. When we talk about crime, police respond after something has happened. But there are many many causes of crime, including lack of economic opportunity, lack of education, mental health concerns, drug addiction. And so we know that this COVID-19 crisis has actually put pressure on all of us and exacerbated those issues. So I'm not surprised that violent crime went up, but I don't think that's related to cries to defund the police. I also think it's important to note that even though we have new programs, the MPD budget was $571 million. All of the other programs that we have, the alternative programs, are minuscule. I think it's less than $2 or $3 million compared to that. So we're not actually giving them a fair shot to demonstrate viability or effectiveness, which is what I'm committed to do on the council by lessening the MPD budget and investing more in some of these alternative models that we know work.
Thank you. Ms. Pickering, you can go next.
Thank you. Well, I think this rhetoric about defunding the police does embolden criminals, and I think we've seen an increase in crime activity across the board. I know my local neighborhood listserv has a lot more going on than they did, 9 months or a year ago, and I think that's probably true all over town. I think we need to look at ways to cut things like the streetcars to nowhere. Why are we funding streetcars to nowhere when we really ought to be putting those resources elsewhere to promote public safety and to keep our citizens safe in this unusual city and during these difficult times?
Thank you. Christina Henderson.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. So my daughter used to go to a daycare center in Shaw that was right at the corner where we had multiple daytime shootings, and it took a while for MPD to respond in terms of actually putting more officers to patrol or putting cameras in that particular street corner. And so I actually don't think that what we've seen over the protests and things like that over the last summer have a correlation to the increases that we've had in crime. I live in Ward 4. There was a shooting on my block this summer. There was also a stabbing on my block as well. So I think that, as Jeanné said, every summer there's always an uptick increase in crime, but I feel like the impacts of COVID-19 are certainly putting some additional stressors on things like that. But when you hear the chief talk about, in his press conferences around a particular incident, he often talks a lot around, these are neighborhood beefs or young people who are unable to, resolve their own interpersonal conflicts, and they're resorting to guns and violence to do it. And so that lets me know that perhaps we know who these individuals are and that we should probably engage trusted members of the community so that we can build trust and relationships there so that, they could put down their guns and,
thank you,
end the violence.
Mr. Merrifield. You're on mute. You're muted. Will, you're muted.
Sorry, I promise I'll be the last time. I do not believe that the defund the police movement has emboldened anyone to commit violent crimes. I think that we have to look at violent crime as, one, we have to interrupt it. The DC Council, other Ms. Lewis just said, we have not invested and funded alternative models to interrupt violence. And then long-term, we have to look at it in a preventative approach. That's living wage jobs, that's housing stability, and that's access to a quality public education. This system is thriving on the fact that we have one of the highest unemployment rates of African-American men in the country, a public school system that has been disinvested in and doesn't work for people, and people are going through tremendous instability in their daily lives through the affordable housing crisis. That chaos causes violence, and that is what we need to work on. That is what we need to invest in, fixing those problems, and violent crime will go way down, I promise you.
And Dr. Scruggs.
Maya Angelou said, I know why the cage bird sings. COVID-19 has made a lot of people feel like they're in cages. So, of course, many people are acting out because they're antsy. And then also because of the financial impact of COVID. Defunding the police is not going to work because you have police now who sit down the street and actually watch crimes. I've had people tell me that I've seen it with my own eyes before they will intervene. Imagine if you defund the police department, you'll see no police at all, okay? The money is needed for programs. What we need to do is overhaul the police department, okay? And get rid of the people who aren't making the difference for district citizens. That's what we need to do. I believe also we have to take back our streets. We have to mentor our young people and show them that gun violence is not the way. Okay, the problem is many people who pick up a gun feel like they no one loves them or they have low self-esteem. So we have to change the tide in that. Also, I advocate for stiffer penalties for people who break the law, period. If you are old enough to pull a trigger, you have made an adult decision, and we are going to have to make sure that everyone is held accountable for his or her crime. But defunding the police will not help that at all.
Thank you. And I will mention a comment that is responding to one of our candidates' comments. Here's the viewer comment. I applaud the suggested reform that mental health workers and others should be a part of the emergency public safety response. Has anyone broached that solution with these professional associations and their members' willingness to be available 24/7 and to be dispatched? And Ms. Lewis answered in our internal written dialogue here. Please inform that viewer that we already have some 24/7 mental health services. They're just not accessible through the dispatch. You have to call them directly. And thanks to Ms. Lewis, we will put the phone number actually in the public comments in case that's of interest to anyone. We will move on here to a topic that a number of you have already mentioned, but we can get a few more details. For this one, we will go around in random order. We'll start with Dr. Scruggs on this one. The topic is affordable housing. Affordable family housing continues to be a challenge in Southwest. As development has occurred at a rapid pace, many longtime residents and growing families are being priced out of the neighborhood, and finding affordable 2 or 3 bedroom housing is getting tougher. What specific ideas do you have to increase and improve affordable housing opportunities for families? We'll start with Dr. Scruggs and then go in random order.
I personally feel, as I drive throughout the city, that Southwest is being overdeveloped. There was a time when you could drive down past the wharf and enjoy the beauty of the wharf, no matter who you were, as long as you smelled the Old Bay in the air. Well, guess what? Now you have to pay for it, and I think that's a problem. We have to, we have to really create affordable housing and make developers or make the landlords stick to giving a large percentage of the housing to lower and middle income families. I also advocate for using shipping crates. Now around the country, there's a thing of shipping crates being made into homes. They're very durable. It's a lower cost, and I think that would be something that DC as a whole, and even in Southwest, should look into. Again, I think that the corporate community investment tax is important, where if you want to buy in the district or you want to have a business in the district, then you should have to pay to invest in the district. And I think those are the things that are going to help to move Southwest forward and DC forward in terms of housing.
Thank you. We'll go to Ms. Lewis next on the affordable housing question.
So as I mentioned, I celebrated my prom in the Old Wharf, and it looks a lot different now. So one thing that I remember about Southwest and with the residents that I speak to there now is that Southwest has had several cooperatives, housing cooperatives, multifamily units. And I think that is an opportunity for affordable housing in our city, and also an opportunity for folks to build wealth. So, I know that we have folks who want to rent, but I think that there are several folks who are looking to figure out a way to stay here long term and to build wealth. And so I think investing more in a cooperative model is an opportunity to do that. We also have Greenleaf Gardens in Southwest. And one thing that I've been advocating for is investing in the repair of our public housing stock so that folks who are in crisis or who need public housing can access it. And that frees up housing in other areas for folks who are able to afford it.
Ms. Pickering, you're next.
Thank you. Well, one thing I would do as a council member is have an inventory of available real estate assets in the district. I'm not sure that anybody in the city is doing this, because we've got a lot of assets that are being mismanaged, and the mayor and the current city council have shown by their actions that they really don't have the best interests of our citizens at heart in terms of providing low-income housing and affordable housing. Something else I've learned talking to people all over town is people are sick and tired of these corrupt sweetheart deals with developers where the developers promise to include a certain number of low-income units and then they go back on their promise and don't serve the community. The Hill East project is one such project. I met with the ANC commissioner in that neighborhood and she and her neighbors are hopping mad about that project because this was a sweetheart deal with developers that is not serving the citizens well. I know in Ward 5 people are upset about the Howard University Divinity School mismanagement and the McMillan Reservoir project, which is being thrust on people without any input from the community. So we definitely need to look at what are the needs of our communities and try to serve our citizens well and better manage our resources. And we need better stewardship of the resources that we have. And our current
Thank you.
our current city council hasn't done that.
Thank you. Kathy Henderson.
I suggest that we strengthen the District Opportunity to Purchase Act. TOPA, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act, is really a nightmare, and we've had council hearings that demonstrate that it rarely results in tenants being able to purchase properties, and we need to have some accountability. A lot of, I like the developers, but you have to rein them in, and we have to move towards electing persons that are just not super cozy with developers and are not willing to negotiate with them and just will give them whatever they want. There's another myth that raising the height of buildings will give us affordable housing. Well, we know that isn't true. None of these tall buildings that have these $600,000, $700,000 condominiums are affordable for most of the people that actually reside in the District of Columbia. If I'm elected, I will convene a task force of those developers that have been responsible over the years in providing affordable housing opportunities and just aligning themselves with the vision of district residents. If you're a preservationist, I'm a historic preservationist, we want you on that. I want you on that task force to help lead the way to talk about how we can maintain affordable housing. I'm a real estate broker. I can tell you that there are $500 and $600 a month rents in this city. Yes, I know you may not believe it, but yes, there are. And we can build on that because that housing is actually owned by older landlords that the city doesn't know about.
Thank you very much, Ms. Henderson. Thank you. Christina Henderson.
Yes, thank you. So when I talk about housing equity and just equity in general, I generally mean that our policies need to be targeted and intentional. And I feel like that's the same way when we talk about affordable housing. We have not been targeted and intentional, I feel like, for a long time in our city, which has resulted in, 1% of our affordable housing being in Ward 3, whereas 50% of our affordable housing being in Ward 7 and 8. To me, that's not equitable. There are a couple of things that I'd like to focus on. One is affordable housing preservation. How do we preserve the affordable units that we already have, whether it be public housing units or rent control units, expanding the rent control to include more buildings into that affordable housing stock. I also want to talk about home ownership and affordable home ownership. One of the things that I've been talking about in this campaign is the development of a community land trust, whereby people can sell their homes to the trust to pass it on to another family and keep that home and affordability for perpetuity. In that, we also still need to invest in programs like DC Open Doors and HPAP and EPAP that help residents, get over the hump in terms of affording their down payment, because many times the down payment is really what is the barrier to home ownership for a lot of middle-class families. Thanks.
Thank you. And last on this question, Will Merrifield.
Yeah, I'm anchoring my platform in this concept known as social housing. I believe we have to take developer influence out of the equation. The way social housing works, it's a model that's based on an international model that's very common in other parts of the world that have achieved the human right to housing. The way it works is the municipality, in this case the District of Columbia, builds housing. That housing is open to anyone and they pay 30% of their income in rent. So it's deeply affordable, non-means tested housing. The higher incomes subsidize the lower incomes because the profit motive has been removed. 100% of rent is used productively. It's invested back into the building at the end of the month. What would have been a profit for the developer turns into a surplus for the building. That surplus actually pays off the construction loans for the building. So this is a way to build truly affordable mixed income housing that pays for itself. The only reason that this is not housing policy in the United States is because of the undue influence of developers in our housing policy. I've litigated against developers in my work as a housing attorney. I will tell you, they brag about the fact that they control housing policy in Washington, D.C. Our affordable housing crisis reflects the fact that they completely control housing policy in DC. We have to take them out of the equation. We have to essentially give people a public option to rent, and we have to pair this with a jobs program post-pandemic to put people back to work, building green, new, deeply affordable housing that is open to anyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mentioned that I would provide the information that Ms. Lewis provided related to the comment from a viewer on mental health. The 24/7 mental health services dispatch is through the Department of Behavior Health Community Response Team 24/7 service. The phone number, if anyone needs it, is 888-793-4357. We will move on. Thank you for that dialogue on affordable housing. Next question, and we will get to everyone on this. We will start with Christina Henderson. On what committee would you hope to serve on the council as your priority committee, and why? So Christina Henderson.
Priority committees. Oh man, this is a really hard question because when I served for Councilmember David Grasso, his first year he was on 5 different committees, including the Committee of the Whole. But I want to sort of step outside of the box because we haven't had a chance to talk about this a little bit. One committee that I'm truly hoping to work on is the Committee on Transportation and the Environment. My father was a New York City bus driver for 29 years, and I feel like public transportation is an essential service in our city. It helps bring our people together, particularly our essential workers who are in transit-dependent areas. And I'm really concerned in terms of the future of public transportation in the city in terms of its reliability. And I feel like we need additional oversight and investments and some creative thought and thinking in terms of how we advance public transportation, but also the environmental sustainability that we have here in the district given climate change.
Thank you. Dr. Scruggs, on what committee would you hope to serve on the council and why?
Well, obviously I'd love to serve on committee on health, as well as education and public safety, but I'd like to serve on a committee of health because for years we've had people who aren't really acquainted or aware of the healthcare needs here in the city and health disparities. And we need someone with the clinical and administrative know-how to make decisions that are going to put DC in the best light possible in terms of healthcare. We need to be the example to the rest of the world in what healthcare should look like. And that's why I want to serve the District of Columbia citizens by being on the Committee of Health and as its chair.
Thank you. Kathy Henderson, same question.
Yes, I think the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety and Transportation and the Environment are clearly easy fits. And I certainly would like to either chair or serve on those committees, but that will be, of course, up to the chairman if I am elected. I am very interested in education and the libraries. Our public libraries have lost ground and are not uniformly meeting the needs of all of our citizens. And I participated in a couple of more than a couple of hearings to express my concerns. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that our libraries actually serve our city, and they're not doing that. We have some communities that have no library resources, and we need stronger oversight over the schools. So I look forward to being a fully engaged council member, and I want to make sure that I continue to touch on every issue, resolve issues, and move forward and demonstrate the work that I've done on a wide variety of issues, which underscores my 20-year record as an effective advisory neighborhood commissioner who's actually delivered for constituents.
Will Merrifield, same question.
It probably doesn't surprise anybody, but I would like to serve on the Committee of Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization. I have, working at the legal clinic, defending, being on the front lines of this displacement struggle, I've seen the impact, the repeated trauma that this housing crisis has on families and children especially. I truly believe that we can get to a human right to housing. I think it's our responsibility to do so from a moral perspective, but also from an economic nuts and bolts perspective. We need to lower the cost of housing so that people aren't rent burdened and they can spend money back into the local economy. We need wealth and money being recycled back into the local economy instead of giving it away to developers to cause a crisis, traumatize families, and then hoard that wealth in a way that it never gets recycled back into the economy.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
Yes, so I'd be interested in chairing the Committee on Government Operations. That committee was able to introduce and successfully pass the REACH Act, Racial Equity Achieves Results Act, which now mandates an Office of Racial Equity. It also oversees all the different agencies that work with different constituents across the city. And given that we are going to have to make some hard decisions to recover economically and also socially in our city, it's even more important that we engage folks at every single corner of the city. And that committee allows us to do that. And that Office of Racial Equity is going to allow us to actually assess whether our legislation does have a racial equity lens or not. I'm also interested on the Committee on Transportation and the Environment because transportation is an equity issue. Living in Ward 7, I see very clearly how those who don't have access to a car are disenfranchised by the lack of transportation here. But that committee also looks at public land. And I think when we talk about housing and housing solutions, we need to pay much more close attention to public land and how it's being distributed, who's buying it, who it's being given to, what are the benefits associated with it. And I see that as a core part of my housing proposed solutions.
Thank you. And Ms. Pickering?
Thank you. Well, the first committee that I would like to serve on is education, because as we've discussed before, I think this is really our primary mission, is educating our children. A second committee would be the one that's in charge of contracting and procurement. I have a background in contract management, and I think things like the sole source lottery contract are just appalling. And this happened before the COVID shutdowns. There's an oversight body for the Office of Contracting and Procurement that's the equivalent of the fox minding the chicken coop. And we've got a $5.8 billion contracting budget. We need better management and better stewardship of taxpayer dollars that are contracted out through that shop. And so that's the other committee that I would
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On this next one, I think we'll do a show of hands again. Southwest and Navy Yard are familiar with having sports stadiums in the neighborhood. Currently, there's an ongoing discussion citywide regarding public subsidies, so taxpayer subsidies being used to move the Washington football team to DC. Please raise your hand if you support the use of taxpayer subsidies to move the Washington football team to DC. Well, I guess it's unanimous. Would anyone like to comment on this? Dr. Scruggs?
Right now, we have so much more we need to focus on. Money needs to be spent, making sure we get our people back to work, that we get them, allow them to stay in their homes, and that we help to get DC back on track. Some people say COVID is going away. Well, COVID's not going away anytime fast. After the physical is over, then the financial and the mental will last for a while. And we need to be in a position to make sure that our citizens their needs are met. And I like the I like the Washington football team, but a priority to moving them to DC on taxpayer dollars when we're already so strained, that's not a priority for me, no.
Will Merrifield, then Christina Henderson.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to move into this time where a lot of politicians are going to be talking about the need to cut, and those same politicians will support, giving public subsidies to a billionaire to build a sports stadium. We can't have that. We need to build infrastructure that benefits the people, like social housing. And I will say that as a big Washington football fan, I mean, I went to Ohio State, so I got, Dwayne Haskins, Terry McLaurin, and Chase Young. I'm rooting for them, but they need to build their own stadium.
Thank you. And Christina Henderson?
I just think that there's so much better things that we can do with the land, especially in terms of activating the river. The idea of, miles and miles of parking lots just is not appealing in terms of our efforts in terms of the Anacostia. But I also wanted to mention, I feel like my experience having worked in Congress actually helps in this regard. So not a lot of people realize that the RFK Stadium is federal property that has to be transferred to the district. And there are ways in which, there are developers and others can go around district residents to get language put in to the congressional appropriations to say that, yes, DC, you could have the RFK Stadium, but it must be used for the purposes of entertainment and sports. And so if I'm elected as a council member, I want to use, my experience on the Hill to fight against that and to ensure that DC residents are not, again, usurped by congressional power.
Thank you. We'll move on. Next question, and this one we will start with Ms. Lewis and then go in random order. What ideas do you have to improve transportation in the district, whether related to traffic, metro and public transit, or other forms of transportation? And we'll start with you, Ms. Lewis.
So I think we need to first start with looking at our buses. There are a lot of people who rely on the bus. It's less expensive than the metro, and we know that metro doesn't reach everywhere that it needs to go. So my first priority would be to do an assessment of our bus infrastructure, and especially in light of COVID and looking at our essential workers and where they live and making sure that's tight. I think for Metro Rail, which is where the majority of the revenue comes from, we should look at staggered start times for businesses, and the city can incentivize and encourage businesses to have staggered start times so that the ridership is also staggered. It makes it safer in light of COVID, but it also could encourage more folks to take the train because they would be less crowded. It would be less of an inconvenience for them. And in terms of traffic, I actually think that's not going to be a problem for us in the near future because of COVID-19. And so I'd rather us focus our attentions on strengthening our public transportation infrastructure in this upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you. Ms. Kathy Henderson.
While serving as an advisory neighborhood commissioner, I actually convened a meeting with Metro management to discuss the service improvement on the X2 and the X8 bus lines. It was a very productive dialogue with my community. The meeting was standing room only, and we left that meeting with a commitment from Metro to add additional run times to the X8 and to improve the conditions on the X2. So if I am elected as the at-large council member, I'm going to expand those conversations. I'm going to sit down with Local 689. I represent, as a commissioner, members who work for Metro, and I want to make sure that we talk as a community and as a team. I'll use a team approach to make sure that we get the buses clean. We make sure that we adhere to schedules so that we can serve all of our citizens and have a world-class transportation system that not only moves people efficiently, but also reduces our carbon footprint on the environment.
Thank you, Ms. Pickering.
Thank you. Well, starting with sort of new and trendy modes of transportation first, again, I know from talking to people all over town, we need to do something citywide in terms of common sense solutions to the bikes and scooters. Now, these are environmentally friendly, great new ways of transportation, but people are sick of scooters being left willy-nilly in sidewalks and all over the place. I know folks in some neighborhoods have told me their neighbors just pick up those scooters and throw them in the trash because they're impeding people from walking up and down the street. So we need some common sense solutions to these new environmentally friendly modes of transportation. Something else that as a longtime resident I think we need is clear signage for parking purposes. There are so many places where the signs are so confusing. There are 3 or 4 signs and you can't make head or tail out of them. We also ought to be collecting our parking tickets. We're delinquent in that area in terms of raising money. And as to WMATA, I had the pleasure of working with them as a client some years ago, and they're like the opera. They are not economically self-sustaining. The word profit is not in their vocabulary. They call it revenue service, and they depend on subsidies from all the jurisdictions that enjoy their service to make ends meet. And I think, again, WMATA needs to look at its routes, particularly its bus routes. I know before the shutdown, some of our local ANCs were talking about buses, and we need to look at better ways to serve. people who use that.
Thank you. Christina Henderson.
Thanks. So I feel like as a city, we can't afford for everyone to go back to riding in their own personal vehicle out of personal safety, right? It sets us back in terms of our Vision Zero goals, and it certainly sets us back in terms of our environmental goals. And so we have to invest in public transportation, in particular the bus. I think if we made the bus more reliable, more people would use it. And so there's a number of different ways to do that. First, I think in certain areas of the city, we do have to look at investing in bus lanes to just allow for traffic to move at a more quicker pace, particularly around 16th Street, and there are parts of 7th Street near Georgia Avenue as well that could use this. But also looking at connectivity, like why are we still running parts, DC Circulator around the tidal basin when the Smithsonian's and other things like that are closed? We could reroute some of those routes into neighborhoods like 5, 7, and 8, parts of 6, where they have least connectivity, but we also know that we have we have a sustained ridership even during this COVID pandemic. Another thing that I also want to look at is bike lanes. My husband and I, we have an 18-month-old toddler, and we are bikers. But I also had a friend who, that was my time. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Will Merrifield.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to have to worry about traffic for a little while, but it's essential that we have a strong public transportation system. Buses are an essential part of that. I live in Deanwood. It's essential to have the buses that run on time. Our workers still need to get to work. And it's essential that we're investing in, transportation that is affordable for workers. Many of our workers have been displaced and work outside of the district. So we have to have hours that they're able to access public transportation to get home. I know a lot of, restaurant workers before the shutdown, with Metro Limited, literally were stranded and can't get back home. Then they have to call an Uber, and that adds to the cars in the streets. So I am for a continued investment in strong public transportation, a continued investment overall in things that benefit the public collectively. So public transportation is a big part of that.
Thank you. And Dr. Scruggs.
First off, I advocate, those who don't know about Metro Access. Metro Access is a part of the public transportation that takes patients to and from their appointments and that sort of thing. It is the worst. They don't show up on time to pick up the patient. They leave before the patient is done. So that certainly would be one of my biggest points of contention to fix as council person. Also, we need commuter buses on these smaller streets to get people to the main thoroughfares. I mean, have you seen a big old bus trying to come down a little bit street, knocking cars left and right? It's a mess. So that would be something that I would certainly bring to the forefront. In terms of parking, there is not enough parking in DC. There's just absolutely not enough parking. And so we need to increase either parking garages where people can park or have more spaces available for people to park, because there are going to be people driving in DC. The last thing I will touch on is that we need to do a better job with our bikers who want to be motorists driving in the middle of the lane in front of people, causing big traffic jams and putting themselves in harm's way. So I would certainly strengthen laws that would make it easier to either share the road, or we give the road to the bikers, or we give the road to the motorists.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll now move to a show of hands question. This is on the topic of an excise tax on sugary foods or drinks. Please raise your hand if you support an excise tax on sugary foods or drinks. Looks like Mr. Merrifield and Mr. Scruggs raise their hands. Mr. Merrifield, you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's a public health issue. I know that a lot of people think it's big brother government, but I think it's a public health issue, and it's a good way to get those those things out of the everyday, just to raise revenue and to put a tax on something that doesn't benefit people.
Dr. Scruggs, it looked like you raised your hand. Yep.
Working in an area where diabetes and many different health disparities exist, there's always a temptation to want that sugary food or something that you don't need, just like there's a desire for cigarettes. So if you notice, when the price of cigarettes and taxes on cigarettes went up, some people, just say, I'll quit. Okay, that was their deterrent. So for me, in putting an excise tax on sugary foods, you're creating a deterrent, but a good deterrent. You're making good trouble in the in the sense that people, will then say, okay, well, I'll try something healthier because it's going to be better for my budget.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis, and then Ms. Kathy Henderson after Ms. Lewis.
So we know that sugar is just as addictive, if not more so, than tobacco, nicotine, other addictive substances. And so I think to effectively tax people who, many of whom are living in places without access to healthier choices, including water, because they're still led in DC pipes in many neighborhoods, is not the best solution. And I believe the reduction in smoking was heavily driven by a nationwide PR campaign, not just the price of cigarettes. So I agree that sugar is detrimental and is killing people, especially people that look like me. But I think that investing more in a public awareness campaign, as opposed to taxing people who may be addicted and may not have access to other choices, is a better way to go to reduce sugar consumption.
Thank you. Kathy Henderson.
Just very, very briefly, human beings are wired to enjoy, the wonderful taste of sugar. Unfortunately, it's very damaging to our bodies. I think instead of government overreaching and trying to, to be the food police, I think we need to go into our schools. We need to use Channel 16 and Channel 13, to create public service announcements to help citizens make better food choices, to make citizens more aware of the value of polyphenols in blueberries and dark fruits and fruits in general. We need a public education campaign, not an excise tax.
Thank you. Christina Henderson or Ms. Pickering, would either of you like to comment on this? Ms. Pickering?
Well, I agree with Ms. Henderson. I think, it's a matter of education and not nanny state overreach. I think people can be taught what is good for them and what are good food choices. So I think that's a better approach.
Thank you. Christina Henderson, would you like to comment?
I guess since everyone else sort of spoke on this issue, but I agree with Kathy that I feel like we could do better in terms of education on this. And we've started that in our public schools. We have programs like Food Prints and others, kids, maintaining school gardens and are learning. But, as Jeanné said, unless we can guarantee that folks have access to other alternatives, which, if you've been to some of these corner stores in some of our neighborhoods that have food deserts, this is your option. So I think that, it has to be comprehensive, but I also feel like the excise tax on this is highly regressive.
Thank you very much. We are getting near time, and we'll be sure to allow for brief closing statements too. So this may be the last question. We'll see how much time it goes, see if we can squeeze in one more. But the next question relates to Initiative 77, which was the Washington, D.C. voter-approved ballot initiative to phase out the minimum wage exemption for tipped employees, effectively raising the minimum wage for tipped workers. On June 19th, 2018, the measure was passed by a more than 10% margin. In October 2018, the initiative was repealed by the DC Council before it was enacted. We'll start with Kathy Henderson on this and go around the horn. The question is, do you agree or disagree with the council's actions? Kathy Henderson.
The council was in a very difficult position, and certainly I don't agree with overturning the will of the people, but that initiative was very misleading. I've actually worked as a waitress and as a bartender, and I made lots of great money as a tipped employee during my undergraduate years. But a lot of our residents just did not understand the impact of that initiative. It was very misleading, and the council was put in a very difficult position. And it was just really a bad situation all the way around. I think the proponents of that initiative may have thought they were helping, but they actually were not. And putting that strain on small businesses to raise, wages in that manner is counterproductive. And then it actually results in people actually tipping less because people think that you're going to get the desired salary from your employer. So they may not, and they don't tip as well. And now we're hit by COVID. So tips are practically just dried up. We need to look at a better way to support our restaurant and bar employees so that they can continue to enjoy the wonderful wages that tips provide. So I'd like to revisit this issue, certainly if I'm elected as one of your at-large council members.
Thank you. Ms. Lewis?
So regardless of where one stands on whether Initiative 77 should have passed or not, the fact is that it did. And I think it's a dangerous precedent to set to overturn the will of voters, particularly because that initiative was in the public discourse, just like any other ballot initiative, just like any other candidate. And every person, every advocacy group had due and fair opportunity to debate it and persuade voters to vote in a particular way. As a council member, I would be committed to implementing what the council said it would do, but has not yet done, which is creating a sexual harassment hotline and a wage theft hotline, because the wage theft hotline in particular, I think is critical during this time of COVID-19. We can leverage that infrastructure for workers to also report unsafe working conditions or unhealthy conditions. And we know that sexual harassment often drives tip workers to do things that they wouldn't necessarily do and that they wouldn't otherwise do. And so it's critical that because the council overturned the will of the voters, that the council follow through on its commitment to implement these measures. And I would do that as a council person at large.
Dr. Scruggs?
The council should never overturn the will of the people. I was a busser growing up, and those tips came in very handy. I mean, sometimes I got more tips than I got in my paycheck. So believe me, when you are working in the restaurant industry or the bar industry, you come to rely on that. If you're giving me $15 an hour, but I essentially made almost $20 an hour once I put in my tips, now you're telling me you're going to cut my salary or cut my wage, essentially, yeah, that's a problem. So I don't support the action that the council took to overturn the will of the people. I do agree that it was misleading because many people thought that tips would still stay the same, just the wage would be increased, but no one really considered that it would have the alternate effect.
Thank you. Mr. Merrifield?
Yeah, I don't support overturning the will of the people. I think that sets a very dangerous precedent. As far as Initiative 77 itself, I agree with Ms. Lewis that we have to really focus on wage theft. And I think it's, the question, the debate with Initiative 77 was, would tips decrease? Wouldn't it be better for workers to get $15 an hour plus tips? So I think that that's an ongoing conversation with workers. But I do not support overturning the will of the people and agree that we need to crack down on wage theft. It is prevalent all over the District of Columbia, not only in the restaurant industry, but also in the construction industry.
Ms. Pickering?
Hi, well, speaking as a former waitress, I too enjoyed making way more than the minimum wage when I was working as a waitress, and I did my best to hustle for my employer and for our customers. So Initiative 77, while well-intentioned, is not a good idea. It's a bad idea in jurisdictions where similar measures have been passed. It's been a job killer because even before the COVID shutdowns, it has caused a lot of businesses, including small mom and pop restaurants, to close because they simply couldn't afford that minimum wage for their staff. So I don't think it's a good idea. I think there are better ways to work, and I think our restaurant industry needs to be revitalized, and we don't need measures that would close more of them down, especially at this time.
And Christina Henderson?
I disagreed with the council's move to overturn Initiative 77, as the others have said. I think there was a campaign, there was a debate, healthy debate had on both sides, and I feel like the people voted and they made their will heard. And this is not the first time that the council has overturned a particular initiative, and so I think this is an important question to ask candidates in terms of your willingness to trust the voters in terms of what they want to see from the city going forward. In terms of Initiative 77 on its face, I support one fair wage. There are several jurisdictions that have implemented this. And, again, lots of misinformation. It was $15 plus continuing to also get your tips. And other jurisdictions, workers have not seen their tips go down and things like that. But I also feel like we have to evaluate that in the age of COVID. We are now asking our restaurant workers who are relying on tips for their salaries to enforce all of these various rules around social distancing, small groups, wearing masks. And now, these are the very people that they have to rely on. And so we are creating our own system of inequities in terms of not having one fair wage. And so, thanks.
Thank you very much. And I think we will try to keep everyone on time here. Hopefully this has been informative for our viewers, as well as informative for the candidates. And we want to thank all of you for participating. We want to thank all of our viewers for watching and submitting questions ahead of time, as well as the comments and questions during the forum here. We will do closing remarks now from each candidate, also in random order, and we'll look to keep this to 30 seconds or less for each set of closing remarks. And after that, we will then kick it back over to Donna Purchase of SWNA. So we will start with Christina Henderson for closing remarks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for such great moderation, Mike, and thank you to SWNA again for having us. My name is Christina Henderson, and I'm asking for your vote. You can go to my website, ChristinaHenderson.org, to find out more about my background and my plans for the District of Columbia. It would be an honor to serve you as your at-large council member this year, or excuse me, next year.
Thank you. Dr. Scruggs.
My promise to the District of Columbia is that I will work for you from the first day to the last day. I am, again, Dr. Michangelo Scruggs, and I am seeking the privilege to become DC Council Member at Large. Please go to www.drmicdccouncil.com. That's DRMICDCCOUNCIL.com to read more on my platforms on how I'd like to create a new DC with you and for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merrifield.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Will Merrifield. My website is will4dc.com. Please go there. You can learn more about my platform. I want to thank the organizers of this event. I thought it was great. I want to thank my fellow candidates. I thought that, it was a great discussion. Look, I've been on the front lines fighting against very powerful special interests for the last 8 years. If you elect me, I will continue to fight with people for affordable housing, for living wage jobs, for healthcare available to everyone, and quality public education. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pickering.
Well, thank you, SWNA, for this opportunity to meet with you and with your fellow citizens. My website is www.maryadc2020.com, and you can learn more about me and my platform there, and I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Henderson.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity this evening, spirited debate. Thank you, candidates. I have a proven record of making government work for my constituents. I have a 20-year record. I've won awards. So you already know that I'm well-intentioned, hardworking, and I can deliver. And I want to deliver for all of DC. My website is kathyhendersonfordccouncil.com. I look forward to more conversations about the excellent work I've done. And I assure you, if I get on the council, you will see positive changes in all 8 wards. Thank you. God bless you. And I appreciate so much that you're interested to hear what our perspectives are and thought enough of this process to ask us questions, difficult questions, and to hear our responses. So God bless you. Thank you. And let's go get them, voters, November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Lewis.
Thanks so much to SWNA for having me tonight. My name is Jeanné Lewis, running as an independent for council at large. My website is JeannéLewisAtLarge.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Ms. Jeanné Lewis. We are in an unprecedented time, and so what we've done in the past is not going to get us through anymore. But we have to center and remember is that DC is our home. When we face a crisis in our home, we don't start by thinking about who we're going to leave behind. We start by thinking about how we can find solutions where we're all going to be able to get through the crisis together. And that's what I commit to do as your council member at large, whether it's on equitable development, excellent schools, or sustainable housing. So thank you again, and please consider me for your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you again to all of you for the respectful and informative conversation. SWNA really appreciates it. The Southwester really appreciates it. So thanks to all of you. And with that, I will kick it back over to Donna Purchase.
Oh, hi, there I am. How are you, everybody? I want to tell you, you are a model panel. Everyone stuck to time. You didn't talk over each other. And I learned a lot tonight. So I thought there was a lot of stuff that I already knew, but after the last 3 nights, I realized that these forums are really important. And I hope that our audience has been as impressed as I am with all of the candidates. And we certainly wish you the best. As we said earlier, tomorrow, all 3 forums will be posted on our website, on our social media pages, so that if you want to share the panel that you're on with your networks, feel free to do so. And we hope that you will. Good luck to all of you on November 3rd. We'll be watching you closely. You know how to get in touch with us if there's anything else we can do. And if you would like to put an ad for your campaign in the Southwestern, just email me or Mike, and we'll make sure it happens. Thank you. And that email will be president@swana.org. And I can get you all the information about putting an ad in the Southwestern. Thank you again, Mike. Thank you again for being our moderator tonight. And you know how proud we are of you. Mike, again, is a volunteer editor of the Southwestern, and he's never missed a deadline. Thanks, Mike. Good night,
Thanks, Donna.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sounds like it was successful.
Very successful.
Oops, sorry. I thought you were done.
No. Everyone's logging off. I need to take this food downstairs. Now, she was driving me crazy.